Good morning. Today's Shiur in Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah. We're very excited. We're talking about the mitzvah of Yetzias Mitzraim, and begin with the Rambam. Very excited. Halacha Aleph, Beis, and Dalet. So in Halacha Aleph, the Rambam tells us the mitzvah of Yetzias Mitzraim. And he says, mitzvahs asay shal teirah l'sapem b'nisim v'nefloy shenas l'avasayim mitzrayim v'leil chamishas. Mitzvahs to tell the story. Then he adds at the end of that halacha, v'chol hamarich b'dvarim. Somebody who talks a lot about it. Marich. And but he describes what you should be marichin. B'dvarim she'iru. Things that happened, and that word there, this person is praised. All right, we're going to discuss that. It's something that we say in the Haggadah every year, and we'll get to that. Halacha Beis, Rambam writes, after he said mitzvahs asay l'saper Yetzias Mitzraim, Halacha Beis and mitzvah lady elabonim. You gotta tell your children. And he goes through a whole detail and he says, you gotta teach him according to his ability, you know. This is a essay in Chinuch. Ketzat, if he was a little child or he wasn't exceptionally bright, we tell him, my child, you know what happened? We were slaves like this woman that's working here, or like this man that's working here. In the times when people had shvachos and avodim. And today, on this day, we were redeemed and became free. Now, if he was a little smart child, tells him everything that happened and the miracles miracles that happened to Moshe. If he died, shall then everything according to the ability of the child. Again, repeat it. You have to begin something that we all know about, or at least should know about. Start with the negative, what happened, bad things, and end up with the praise and the good things. So what would that mean? Teitzad talks about the times of terror. And in his days, people denied the Eibishter, they went after Avodah Zarah, and then ends up with the good, with the fact that the Eibishter brought us to the true knowledge and belief of the Eibishter. And then he says, and also you tell them that we were slaves and did all the good things, and we talk about the miracles. First, I mean, there were slaves and all the bad things that happened to us, and then the miracles that happened, and again, and he chose us. There he adds a line. Where do you get that information from? From a parsha in Kisavai that starts with Arami Eved Avi, which we do when we read Bikurim. We're supposed to read that parsha. So he says, listen to the words. Who sheyidrash me Arami Eved Avi Hashema Kol HaParsha until he finishes the parsha. And then he adds a new thing. Something that's really unique. Whoever spends time analyzing this precious meshubach. So we have two meshubachs here. And so we need to understand that. Now, we know in the Haggadah, every year, everybody says it, line that goes Kolam Hamar Baharez and Meshubah. Now I was happened to see Yetzias Mitzraim raising Meshubah. But somehow or another, Rambam switched that to B'dvorim She'iru V'Shahoyu. Now, what happened and what was, why? Then, as we just noted, the addition of Amarich, Amaisim Amarich B'drash Parsha Zu Harezim Meshubah. Why the emphasis on this parsha and the drash of this parsha? Why is it so important? Okay. In Halacha Beis, we learned about what he tells the child, what he tells the different levels of child. Now, when he Lefidaite shall ben Oviv Melamdoi teaches him. This is not a classroom. It's not teaching. It's just telling a story. Why the Lashon Melamdoi? Okay, now it's not a question on the Rambam, it's a Lashon the Mishnah, but what does that mean? Now, why is it important that Rambam tell us like this person? I'm getting into these details. Where do we get it from? Then, when he speaks about the Godel Chochem, he tells him all the miracles that happened through Moshe Rabbeinu. Now we know that Moshe Rabbeinu is not mentioned in the Haggadah except by Yaminu B'Hashem Moshe Avdei. But it doesn't say anything about Moshe Rabbeinu. And there's reasons for that. And the Rambam doesn't bring it in the Nuzach Haggadah. So why suddenly here does he talk about Moshe Rabbeinu? Now, when he says Maschil B'Gnus M'Sayim B'Shrach, so there's a machlekes in the Gemara what that means. And the Gemara, one is whether we talk about Terach and Matan Torah, that's the Gnus and Shrach, or we talk about Avodah Meinu and Vayetzias. Now, the conclusion, according to Moshe Shenim, is you do both. Now, I don't want to get into all the details, but the Rambam obviously speaks about two separate things. First, about Terach and the Torah, and then Avodah Meinu, and ultimately B'chiras Hainu. So, in the Rambam's Haggadah, that's not the way it's written. And in our Haggadah, it's not the way it's written. Our Haggadah starts off with Avodah Meinu in response to the Manishtana. And then talks about and that's the way in the Rambam Haggadah it says. Not only that, the question is even the Rambam himself already started when he told the child. He didn't tell him anything about. He said about this Eved, this Shifcha, or all the that's what he focuses on. But suddenly here it seems to reverse. So what's going on here? All right, so not going to get into the details of it, but it seems like the Rambam has two mitzvahs, two concepts of mitzvah, whether it's actual to mitzvah, it's not a discussion there. There's the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzraim, which you learn from one pasuk, and then there's the mitzvah to tell your children, and that's you got the Levincha, and even that has an effect on how you tell it to yourself, but it's a separate concept. So perhaps, according to the Rambam, with this approach, and again, I due to lack of time and just clarity, we'll just keep to that fact. We could say, according to the Rambam, there's two parts that I got. One is when we begin right away, Avodah Meinu, the answer to the child's question. And then, I was saying, till the end of the Haggadah. So now the Haggadah would be divided up in two parts. There's an Haggadah responsive to Manishtana, and then there's an Haggadah of Yetzias Mitzraim. So perhaps the first part of that Haggadah is the Vigadat Levincha. Vigadat Levincha, there's only one issue. Tell him, get him to understand, and teach him about Yetzias Mitzrayim. So, and that's described in Halacha base. There's no din of maskul big news there. You don't have to tell him anything about the history of the Jews. Only what's relevant for him to understand the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, since it's melamdoi, it's a lesson. If you're going to say, yeah, we went out of Mitzrayim. What's Mitzrayim? You got to explain about the meaning of Mitzrayim. That's not maskul big news. That's all part of describing Yetzias Mitzrayim. You can tell him, on this day, we all went out of Mitzrayim. What happened? Who cares? That doesn't answer his question. Unless you tell him that we have murder. Well, you want to know why you have murder. You got to tell him about the meinu. And that's why he stresses here to the not intelligent or little child, try to bring it to reality. Try to make it real. My shifchazu, ahavidzu, teach him. You're teaching him. You gotta make it understandable. The more he gets what you're talking about, the more he understands it. It's not just telling a story. A good storyteller will also find ways to make it real. But you can get away without it. But that's why he stresses that. And if the child is a little older, you have to tell him what happened. And also, again, to make it more real, he mentions Moshe Rabbeinu. But that's all, it's not part of the Nusach Haggadah. That's all part of the Melamdoi. Teach him is your own personal thing. And you do what you do, add what you have to. And that's why here we don't talk about Avodah Zarah, because we're talking about the story, to teach the child about Yetzias Mitzrayim. If you like Avodah Zarah, doesn't teach him about Yetzias Mitzrayim. It has a value in Yetzias Mitzrayim, but not what. That's the first part of a Haggadah. Now comes the second part of Haggadah. That's Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now begins, how do you tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim? You tell it from the beginning? From how everything began and the Shtalshul till that Yankiv one of Yodel Mitzrayim and all that? Or do you start only about Avodah Mayinu? Which one goes first? And the Rambam holds you have to start with the Avodah Zarah. No, with Avodah Mayinu has nothing to do with that. Avodah Mayinu has to do with the Sipur, with the Vigadat Levincha. Now the Yishalmi just brings. The one says. Rabbi M tzorich la'aschel be'vanor yosh Rabbi Seichem be'ekes avichem v'arbe, and there's no other opinion. So therefore, the Rambam learns there must be something special about that parsha, and that parsha really is the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. You want to know the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, not the limud of Yetzias Mitzrayim. You're teaching your children. For you, you're not learning the time. You're telling the story. Telling the story, you got to start from the beginning. And that's why he stresses that's Chiddush over what was said in Halacha. Halacha Aleph is talking specifically about teaching Yetzias Mitzrayim. But when you want to know the maskil b'gnus of Messiah b'shvach of gnus of Zara and also the gnus of Yetzias Mitzraim, it's got to be through this parsha. Okay, so again, the main point is that there are two concepts. What happens in the beginning of the parsha, in the beginning of the Haggadah, is responsive, and that part of the Haggadah is not part of the, according to the Rambam, it's not part of Maskil B'gnus Mitzrayim. When you talk about Avodah Miyinu, is you're just teaching, Lamdai, teaching a child. It's a good lesson for teachers. And when you teach, you got to make it real. Then there is the sipur part, which has to do with every person for themselves, not understanding, but just relating the story. You want to relate the story? Torah related the story. Torah gave you a story. Where did the Torah tell the story? In Parshas Yisrael. No, Torah told the story in Parshas Shmais, Ve'er, no, that's where the story happened. It's not a storyteller telling. I once heard, and I want to relate it to this, that I may even be a Maimer Azal, but I don't remember. It might be a medrash somewhere that there was some, I think it may have been that there's somebody who, when he came to a certain part of the Torah or the Nevi'im where a story happened, he would curse the Russia in the story. And the reason he would curse the Russia, because he would say, look at the terrible things he did. Then later, when his name is mentioned somewhere else, he didn't curse him. So he explained, because that's where he's doing the bad thing. That's why I cursed him there. In other words, Shmais Ve'er B'Shalach is good for the Vigadat Levincha. That's the Vigadat Levincha part, where you actually teach Parshas, teach the idea. I mean, you can do it as you want. You explain it the best you can, then you can teach it. But you die to Shoben. That has to do with education. Isavai is Sipur Yetzias Mitzraim. That's where the Torah tells you the story. And in the Torah story, the Rambam understands it begins with the importance of understanding that there was Terach and Be'ekach Hasavicha. Okay, so that's the gist of this Rambam, perhaps. Anyway, everybody have a great day.